Good afternoon. Can you hear me? The cameras? Good to go? Great. Good afternoon. I am Michael Tyler, Biden-Harris Campaign Communications Director, joined here by U.S. Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino and Metro PD Officer Daniel Hodges, both here in their personal capacities today. And I will start by saying simply that political violence has no place in the United States of America. It should never be acceptable. This is a conversation that should not even be necessary. In fact, it's a conversation that even a decade ago would have been unrecognizable in our political discourse. But it's not anymore. And there's one reason for that. That reason's name is Donald Trump. Tomorrow, Trump leaves Mar-a-Lago to campaign in Wisconsin and Michigan. But this weekend, he campaigned by sharing a violent image of President Biden hogtied and gagged in the back of a pickup truck, waving MAGA flags. It was not the first time, and sadly will not be the last time, that Donald Trump chooses to traffic in violence as he seeks to regain power. At a time when we need leaders who will bring our country together, Donald Trump is engaging in extreme rhetoric that promotes division, hate, and violence in our country. He encourages white nationalists and cheers on the disgusting behavior of the extreme far right. He pretends to care about his base, about law enforcement, about workers, about keeping Americans safe and caring for Americans who are struggling. But he doesn't actually give a damn. Donald Trump is perfectly comfortable with violence when he thinks it benefits him. In fact, he encourages it. Put simply, his campaign is about himself. It's about revenge. It's about retribution. It's about retribution on his so-called enemies. He's made very clear how he intends to conduct this campaign and how he would conduct another term in office if he gets the chance. Through division, through hate, through violence, through cruelty. Because this is all Trump knows. Political violence has been and continues to be central to Donald Trump's brand of politics. Throughout his 2016 campaign, Trump encouraged his supporters to, quote, knock the crap, unquote, out of protesters and said he'd pay their legal bills. Trump said there were very fine people on both sides after violent white nationalists and neo-Nazis marched on Charlottesville and killed a woman. Trump celebrated a Republican who attacked a reporter, saying, any guy that can do a body slam, he's my type. In 2020, before he encouraged the violent mob to storm the Capitol, Trump refused to condemn white supremacist violence by far-right groups like the Proud Boys, telling them to stand back and stand by. We all know what happened on January 6th. He encouraged his supporters to violently stop the peaceful transfer of power, telling them if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. But he didn't stop there. He suggested that former Joint Chiefs Chairman General Mark Milley should be executed. Trump calls his political opponents vermin, and they should be rounded up and imprisoned, and described migrants as, quote, not people, who are poisoning the blood of this country. And now he begins every campaign rally with an ode to the January 6th rioters who violently tried to overthrow our government, and he's promising a bloodbath unless he can serve as a dictator on day one. 4 years ago, the American people stood up to Trump's violence and said no more. People voted for Joe Biden. More people voted for Joe Biden than for any presidential candidate in American history, dramatically rejecting Trump's extremism and his hate. But now Trump's back. He's running his old playbook, betting that he can use division and lies to worm his way into the presidency once again. But it will not work. There are few who understand the violence that Trump inspires better than the two gentlemen I'm with today. U.S. Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino and Officer Daniel Hodges, Metro PD. Again, both here in their personal capacities, and both heroes who protected the U.S. Capitol and our very democracy from violent rioters who believed Donald Trump's lies. Because of their brave actions that day, what was a terrible tragedy was not a far, far worse situation where more people would have lost their lives. I'll turn it over to Sergeant Ganell.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sergeant Aquilino, former United States Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Ganell. I immigrated to the United States when I was 12 years old. I probably became a U.S. citizen shortly after. Since my arrival, I strive to be a productive member of our society and to make this country great even better. Despite the adversities, I devoted myself to defend our country at home and abroad while I was in the Army and as a police officer. Remaining silent is not an option. I'm here today not just for myself, but as a voice for all the men and women who put on a badge every day to keep our communities safe. I'm here for those who put their lives on the line to protect the capital, and our democracy on January 6, 2021. That day, we found ourselves in the middle of an unprecedented attack on our capital and our country. Those of us in uniform were assaulted and beaten by a mob delivered by Trump's lie that day on 2020 election. It was stolen. Since then, Trump has done nothing to dismiss, downplay, or outright drum up political violence. He's not the only now he not only doesn't denounce it, he encourages it. He never made any efforts to support the USCP, Capitol Police, or Metropolitan Police Department. The only outreach that he had made regarding us, those of us who defended the Capitol, was when he when we were testifying in front of Congress that he called us pussies. So much for supporting the police and law and order. Trump calls the criminals who attack our capital, hostages, patriots, and political prisoners. If there are those things, then who are we, the police officers who defended the Capitol? And he also promised to pardon them if he is reelected. He says he is said supporter will be his supporter will be vindicated and proud. He plays footage of that awful day at rallies, downplaying the attack and lying that the insurrectionists were unarmed, saying that if it was an insurrection, that there would be guns. He needs to look at the cases in court, and he'll see that there are weapons, firearms that were confiscated on that day. His failure to denounce violence on January 6, 2021 is a slap in the face to every officer who put their life on the line that day. He doesn't give a damn about us. He care only about himself and the photo ops. It has been 1,181 days since the attack that he helped orchestrate, and not once has he met or called any of the police officers who were injured at the Capitol by the people on his behalf. He selectively supports the police and is evident and deceptive. He can't claim he backs the blue and fan the flames of division and violence. You can't claim to support the rule of law and at the same time support those who try to upend our democracy. You can't claim to support law and order and stand at attention saluting the American flag while they play a modified national anthem written by a convicted felon who attacked my coworkers. That's not leadership. That's betrayal. Trump praises dictators and encourages violence. He threatens bloodbath if he's not reelected. He's he is promised to be a dictator on day one. On his inauguration day, he promised to end the American carnage. To my belief and peril, that's what I encountered on January 6th. A mob of his supporters injuring me and my colleagues as we defended the Capitol. For Trump, the violence is a weapon to get what he wants: power, revenge, retribution. I had seen what happened if someone like him has power, and I barely survived it. I was assaulted by many times by more than 40 rioters throughout that day. I was beaten, punched, kicked, pushed, beaten with my own riot shield, crushed in the mob, in the tunnel, for merely doing my job and keeping my oath. Some tried to drag me into the mob and beat me with the American flag still attached to a flagpole. Others were assaulting me and telling me that they were doing that for me, as if I wanted a beat down. I suffered permanent and severe injuries. The most severe required 2 surgeries, and although most of my physical injuries had healed, the scars of that day are seared in my memories. My PTSD and moral injuries remains. I live in fear that our sacrifices has been desecrated. Many of the elected officials who I defended on that day have sided with the former president despite the danger and fear that they felt on January 6th. And the only reason why they escaped the mob was because actions that I took and my colleagues to save their lives. The same officials, those are the same officials who were running to safety and were able to because what we did, not because of lack of trying by the mob. You don't have to wonder what will happen to our democracy and our constitution if Trump is elected again. He's telling us, he has shown us, and on January 6th will look like a rehearsal if we can and we cannot depend on Trump Republicans to defend the Constitution, since they also have sided against law and order and the rule of law and excuses his misbehavior and conduct and crimes. Every single American should listen to what Trump is saying, and he's saying that he is willing to do January 6th again. That's frightening, and he must not be elected in November. As a final point, I need to thank a number of people who have supported me since that horrific day on January 6, 2021. My wife, Monica, my beloved son, and President Biden and Jamie Raskin for at least acknowledging that what happened on January 6th should not have happened at all. Thank you. And now I'll leave you with Officer Daniel Hodges.
Good afternoon. I'm here today speaking to my experiences in my personal capacity as a private citizen, and my remarks reflect my personal opinion, not those of my employer. As a police officer who experienced the attack on our Capitol firsthand, I believe Donald Trump and his MAGA movement are the greatest threat to our democracy across the country today. Donald Trump has encouraged and continued to encourage political violence. My fellow officers and I experienced that type of violence at the hands of a mob of MAGA extremists on January 6th, all because they bought into Donald Trump's lie that the 2020 election was stolen. That day, officers were beaten and brutalized. Trump never reached out to us. Here's a message for Donald Trump. You can't call yourself pro law enforcement when you inflame and encourage political violence at every turn. You can't claim to be on our side and then promise pardons for the violent insurrectionists who assaulted me and my brave colleagues and killed my fellow officers Brian Sicknick and Jeffrey Smith. We heard from Brian's father and brother last week when Trump attempted to the wake of slain New York City police officer Jonathan Dillard on Long Island. And what happened to Detective Dillard is a tragedy and should be mourned. His sacrifice should be honored. It should not be a political opportunity for Donald Trump, who only cares about his victims of violence when he thinks it benefits him. Detective Dillard's bravery should be celebrated. It should not be a photo op for Donald Trump, who I didn't realize came to New York anymore, unless it was for his own court appearances. There have been 29 line-of-duty deaths for law enforcement already this year. 29. I don't think it was a deep personal connection between Donald Trump and Detective Dillard that motivated Trump to attend the wake for this particular officer. Trump likes to make a lot of noise about how he is a man of law and order, but making noise is just about the only thing he's good at. When you look at everything he has said and done and not done, you'll see where his actual priorities lie. Donald Trump has supported defunding the police. Not only has he said he wants to defund my federal colleagues, but in 2021, just days after his insurrection, he called on Congress to remove $244 million for state and local police from a bill he had already just signed. Conversely, that same year, President Biden allocated $334 million to increase hiring for state and local police, as well as increase security for our schools. This is critical because across the country, we in law enforcement are facing a manpower crisis and we need all the help we can get. Trump wants to sully law enforcement's role in a free and fair society by having us lock up his political opponents simply for opposing him. And he has even stated that he believes we should terminate the Constitution, his word choice. This is an insult not only to those who enforce the law, but to every American who believes in our democracy, rather than Trump's autocratic fantasies. These examples, to say nothing of his dozens of felony indictments, should be more than enough for anyone to see through his insulting law and order platform, but it doesn't even touch on his insurrection of January 6th or the police officers who lost their lives because of or in connection to that day. To quote Officer Brian Sicknick's father, Charles, who spoke out last week, Trump is the reason my son is dead. Trump does whatever will get him votes and helps Donald Trump. There is nothing good about that man. Now he's planning to do the same thing in Grand Rapids tomorrow. He's planning to use the horrible murder of a young woman to scare, to divide, to sow hate, because that's how he thinks he can win the election. Trump has shown us who he is every day for years. Where was Trump when 17 innocent people were gunned down in Parkland, Florida when he was president? Where was he during their funerals? He was golfing. Just months ago, he told families affected by a mass shooting in Iowa that they needed to get over it. He called men and women who died serving and protecting this country suckers and losers. So it always baffles me why he has so much support among my fellow veterans. We know who this man is. It's why his own vice president, who his supporters threatened to hang, is refusing to endorse him. It's why, as a law enforcement officer, I believe he has no place anywhere near the Oval Office. Donald Trump recently said there would be a bloodbath if he wasn't elected, and that if he lost, there would be no more elections. I know what he means, because I saw what he wants on January 6th.
Thank you both for your words. With that, we'll take a few questions. Go ahead. Yeah, this campaign is going to campaign every single day on the truth. And as you pointed out, the truth is that violent crime skyrocketed under Donald Trump's presidency. Crime has fallen under Joe Biden's presidency. Not only did crime skyrocket, but Donald Trump, again, is the one who is talking about defunding law enforcement every single day out on the stump. And so we're going to make sure that the American people understand that. They understand the facts of the record, and they understand what the two candidates are actually saying about solving the issue. When it comes to issues of crime, when it comes to the whole slate of issues, on one side you have a candidate and a president in Joe Biden who is actually bringing people together to solve the problems that we face. And on the other side, you have somebody like Donald Trump, whose entire North Star is about what serves him. It's why he encourages violence instead of actually discouraging violence every single day on the stump when he starts his rallies with an ode to the rioters who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. It's why he's promising to pardon convicted felons who participated in January 6th. It's why he's blowing up things like the border deal that would have actually provided more resources to law enforcement. This man is not a person who actually cares about crime, who actually cares about solving issues. He's only interested in solving himself. So this campaign is going to make sure that the American people understand that every single day between now and November. Go ahead.
To me that there was no violence on January 6th, that the officers were either letting people in or were standing by. I'm just curious, as you process what you experienced that day and chosen to speak out about it ever since, what your message is, and if you still think at this point, years later, it's still worth it to speak out, especially if there are people insisting that what happened that day, especially to you, didn't happen.
Well, that's why we're here today, to amplify what happened to us, to remind the American people that on January 6th, while the members of Congress, senators, and their staff were running for their lives, we were protecting the Capitol. We were defending the tunnel. And I don't know what selective cherry picking images released by um, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and his supporters, whatnot. They cherry pick the narrative about what happened, but they're not showing where the violence was, where we were in the West Front, on the west, in the tunnel. Both of us were side by side on that day. I didn't know him at that time, but we were fighting for our lives. We were fighting to defend and prevent the mob from coming into those entrances where we were getting beat up, we were being attacked, we were being crushed. Members of Congress were rushing to some of those areas to hide for refuge or escape the building. If it wasn't because of what we did on that day, I don't think they would have made it out. I sustained, like I mentioned earlier, 2 surgeries because for the most severe injuries that I sustained. And to this day, I still struggle with some of those things, especially the PTSD, the moral injuries that they have caused, because some of those elected officials who were running for their lives on January 6th, now they had the audacity to tell me that nothing happened. If it did happen, it wasn't as bad as it was. But they know on January 6th who were culpable. They know how fearful they were on that day. And if it wasn't because of what we did, they would have survived.
It's truly incredible, and what a testament it is to the cult of personality around Donald Trump and identity politics today that something as well documented as January 6th and the assault on myself and my colleagues can be just outright denied by some people, because otherwise they would have to admit they were wrong. They would have to admit that so much of what they have based their entire personality and identity on over so many years was false. And it's so much easier to just invent a conspiracy, to say that I'm a crisis actor, or that I've been accused of being a Fed and simultaneously Antifa and a lizard person and God knows what else. So it's truly incredible, and we got to feel as to whether it's still worth it to talk out. Absolutely, because that's the only way you can fight disinformation. That belief that goes among the MAGA crowd that it was all a Fed op that we're all after is that no one was hurt. That's a result of misinformation, of propaganda, and of just the state of where we're at. It's the only way to fight that is with the truth, and you can't give up. The only way we're going to deprogram these people is by continuing to speak out about what the truth is. So as long as it takes, that's what I'm going to do.
One last point. You asked why many police officers and veterans as well they followed that those beliefs. Just like what happened in New York last week, it was horrible. Um, I feel as a police officer and now also as a somebody who risked my life defending the country overseas. I feel some type of connection with what happened. I lived in New York as well for 15 years when I immigrated here. But to have the notion that many of the police officers had that if it didn't happen to them, then it didn't happen at all. I feel for the family and the officer in New York, and that's the type of support that we expected coming from all the law enforcement agencies throughout the country, throughout the nation, when January 6 happened. But instead, as Danny says, we have been ridiculed sometimes. We're being accused of certain things. But some of the same people who claim to support the police are the ones saying those things. And if it was what we did on January 6th was done by any other group, we would have done the same thing, and they would be praising us for it. And we didn't do those things because we were wanting awards or praises. We were just simply doing our jobs, and we thought that by doing our jobs, we were giving those people, the elected officials, a chance to come back, reconvene, and do their job as well. And if that meant risking our lives, that's what we did. And unfortunately, those same people now say that nothing happened, and very shameful.
Yep. With Biden's. Yeah, listen, I think sadly what it is a continuation of the violent imagery, the violent rhetoric, and the entire brand of politics that Donald Trump has perpetuated going back damn near a decade at this point, right? This is a person who, again, going as far back as 2015, announced his campaign by saying that Mexicans were rapists and murderers, who, after Charlottesville, said that there were very fine people on both sides, who, after ahead of the 2020 election, said that the Proud Boys, a known white supremacist group, should stand back and stand by. Before we saw what happened on January 6th, where these two officers were defending our democracy when he incited a violent mob to try to overthrow our election results. And now he's back on the stump every single day, encouraging and celebrating political violence, right? He starts off every rally with an ode to the January 6th rioters. He talks about and jokes about beating up protesters who show up at his rallies. Every single day, he jokes about Nancy Pelosi's husband. And what happened to him. Every single day, this man is stoking violence. It's the only play that he has in his playbook. The problem for him, though, is that the American people have already rejected it. They rejected it in 2020 when Joe Biden beat him by over 7 million votes. The American people continued to reject it in the 2022 midterms when you had a bunch of Trumpian candidates run in all of the states across the country. And Democrats had the most successful midterm cycle for an incumbent president since FDR. You saw it happen last fall in states like Kentucky, Ohio, Virginia, where they tried the same playbook and failed again. And they're going to fail in 2024 because the American people continue to side with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's vision of actually bringing people together to get things done. And they keep rejecting the violence, the chaos, the division that's perpetrated by Donald Trump and the MAGA extremists. Listen, I think overall the message that the American people, that resonates with the American people, is the message that the president talks about every single day. The election is going to be a choice between Joe Biden, who wakes up every single day fighting to bring people together to actually get things done, fighting for an economy that continues to grow from the middle out and bottom up, fighting for our fundamental rights and freedoms, fighting for our democracy, versus Donald Trump, who is running, again, a campaign that's based on revenge and retribution, who's running a campaign talking about that women should be punished for getting abortion care. I think he's about to find out with the latest example in states like Florida, where we're now going to have a ballot initiative where people are going to be able to fight back against the sort of extremism that continues to play out because of what he did in appointing the justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. When it comes to our very democracy, again, every single day, he's reminding the American people and celebrating what happened on January 6th. So regardless of the issue, you fundamentally have a choice between Joe Biden, who's actually fighting to get things done for the American people, and Donald Trump, who is fighting a campaign of violence, of revenge, retribution that's in service of himself. And the American people have rejected it again, and they're going to reject it in 2024. Yeah, well, this campaign has a sense of urgency right now. We are in April of 2024, and we're making sure that the American people understand the fundamental stakes. People say it every cycle, but it's true this time. This is going to be the most important election of our lifetimes because we can choose to either continue the progress that we have made under Joe Biden, continue the economic progress that we've made, 15 million jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs. We continue to lower costs for the American people, like capping the cost of insulin for all folks and not just seniors on Medicare, or we can go back to the failed trickle-down MAGA economics approach that we saw under Donald Trump. Are we going to continue to pursue rights and freedoms, or are we going to have a world in which we restore Roe as the law of the land, or are we going to have what Donald Trump wants, which is a national abortion ban? These are the fundamental stakes of the election, and so we are laser focused on making sure that the American people understand that, and then our campaign operation is laser focused on making sure that we can actually reach the voters who are going to decide this election. That's why we obviously had a fundraiser in New York last week, and yes, it was fun to celebrate the massive amount of money that was raised in the 3 decades of Democratic leadership in the presidency. But what that money is allowing us to do is scale up our operation in partnership with the DNC to make sure that we're able to open up field offices. We have 100 field offices open around the country. We've got battleground state staff on the ground in every single battleground state. So we're going to work day in and day out right now from now until election day to make sure that we can actually talk about the stakes to the American people and make sure they understand the choice that they're going to be met with so that every voter who can vote does vote, and that those who do vote for Joe Biden. Go ahead. Yeah, I think the message that is, regardless of the issue, whether it's the economy, whether it's our fundamental rights and freedoms, whether it's our democracy, the choice is very clear. The person who is fighting for you on those issues is Joe Biden. The person who is fighting for themselves on all these issues is Donald Trump. And you can compare. The thing about this election is that we actually have receipts on both ends. We can compare the records. And on every metric, Joe Biden comes out on top. You look at the economy, 15 million jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, the work that he's done to lower costs for Americans, bringing American manufacturing back. Joe Biden delivered where Donald Trump failed. You look at rights and freedoms. We talked about abortion. Donald Trump spends every single day bragging about the role that he played in overturning Roe v. Wade. Talks about now wanting a national abortion ban if he's able to regain power. On the other side, Joe Biden fighting to restore Roe. And again, our fundamental democracy. Joe Biden running to protect and defend our democracy. Donald Trump celebrating the violence that we saw on January 6th. So the choice is going to be clear on every single metric. The person who's fighting for the American people is Joe Biden. The one who's fighting for himself, Donald Trump.
I have a question for the officers. What do you think of Donald Trump using that song with vocals recorded by January 6th rioters at rallies? That's weird for you?
Yeah, it is a little weird. It is a little weird to me that he would. He had the power to pardon these people while he was in office after January 6th, but he didn't. And now he sees that supporting them could bring him help in the election to come. So he lionizes them. He organized a choir, I guess, and they sing the national anthem. It's absolutely mind blowing. But at the same time, it's totally on brand for Donald Trump. Nothing he does makes any sense for this country.
My opinion is that, remember, um, Colin Kaepernick. They were calling him a traitor, that because he was kneeling for social justice, that he should be punished for just kneeling. And here you have somebody who salute a made up song by the people who attack us, like, as I mentioned earlier, and they are fine with that. There are these people that emblazon his image onto the American flag, but they're okay with that. So, again, tell me again how you support the police and law and order when all these things are happening, and you support the person who orchestrated the violence or the set in motion the events on January 6th, and we lose our career, we're injured, and he's walking free, um, running for his old job when I lost mine. Kind of like give you a sense of, um, I guess, irony that the same people who claim to be on the side of law and order, they don't see the damage and danger that this person. Ask Mike Pence. He knows a few things about what he wanted him to do. Trump wanted him to do on January 6th. You know, he's a material witness. Ask Jim Jordan. He's a material witness too. Kevin McCarthy. He's a material witness too. But they defy congressional subpoenas, and they're okay with that. But God forbid if I do those things. God forbid if I stop doing my job on January 6th on the west front of the Capitol and let those people in. I'll be crucified. I lost my job, and everybody will hate me for it. But I did my job just like everybody else on that day. All we wanted is accountability, and these people are now in charge of the Judiciary Committee. That's a mockery. That's what it is.
We have time for one more. Go ahead.
Angela on CBS. Obviously, you know, January 6th, there are a lot of legal cases kind of making thread. How's your campaign preparing for that similar time period this time?
Yeah, no, the campaign is very much focused on this. Since day one of the reelection effort, we obviously know what happened in 2020, where Donald Trump, even before the election, was claiming that was sowing the seeds to try to overthrow the results of an election when he knew he was in all likelihood going to lose it. So again, much on like the economic record or any other record, we have receipts to compare these two candidates. We know exactly what the Trump playbook is going to be when we do our jobs and beat Donald Trump once again. And our voter protection effort is gearing up to meet that threat. And so the work is going to take place on the front end, and then we're prepared for any contingencies that may arise even after the election results play out. So that's a battle that we're more than prepared to fight. So thank you all very much. We appreciate you.